we just got off having the Montgomery County Council vote on the amendments on the ZTA 1907, which is going to allow cell antenna installations 30 feet from homes in Montgomery County with no routine notice and no public hearing.
I'll take that plunge. I'll go first.
Okay, great.
Once again, thank you, Theodora, for having me here. I really appreciate being here on this panel. I think this is very important. Also, well, actually really sad and disturbing with the recent outcome of what's happening in Montgomery County. I still, like everyone else, have hope that we can push back against this this opposition, and it's really important for me to see what's happening in terms of the unfairness with the legalities of placing these of the what's the word I'm looking for, of the 5G rollout. We were experiencing the same thing in St. Thomas. We basically were having fiber optics being run throughout the island, but there has been recently there has been a change in how should I say, outfitting the island with fiber optics due to the telecom company Latin Liberty that is trying to put this into action. But for this moment, I won't really speak much about that. I'll talk about that a little later. I am just here to say that I'm really thankful to be here, and I pledge my support to get this thing pushed back as much as we can. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm of service, and I want to be of service, and I'm ready to go.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. What you're bringing forth is what's happening around the country, around the world, which is communities are being faced with this. It's being rammed through like it has been in Montgomery County. And here we are. So thank you.
Thank you.
Rick, would you like to say a few words about what you saw and your thoughts on the path moving forward, knowing what's happened here?
Yes, if I can figure out how to unmute myself. Theodora, thank you very much for arranging this call this afternoon. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us at the profound disappointment that the council seems not to be listening to the residents of Montgomery County. And even though they've received an incredible outpouring of communications from residents, just one of the sites that I'm aware of that is helping residents generate letters to members of the council. There's been over almost 1,400 of them as of today. And that's an incredible number of written communications on behalf of residents on a single issue. And I think the members of the council know that, but they're not listening. And it appears that the lead sponsor has something at or close to 6 or 7 votes. And even though there was a valiant effort today by Councilmember Katz, who has long been a supporter of the interests and the rights of residents, particularly on issues involving wireless, and also an effort by Councilmember Hucker to sponsor some, both of them sponsor some resident protective amendments. As you saw from the extraordinarily rapid and perfunctory manner that they were addressed today, those amendments were simply sharply, quickly voted down without any meaningful discussion. And the two groups of amendments are really remarkable statements about the deficiencies of ZTA 1907. So it was very, very sad, very disappointing to see the council so cavalierly pander to the interests of the wireless lobby and push aside the concerns of the residents of Montgomery County, large number of residents of Montgomery County, who are expressing their deep displeasure at this zoning text amendment. And by the way, per the request a minute ago, I am Rick Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. I am the Executive Director of the Montgomery County Coalition for the Control of Cell Towers.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And on the website, on your organization's website, there's a lot of information, and there has been such incredible work by yourself and your colleagues working on looking at permits and finding all sorts of technical issues related to the deployment of this infrastructure in our county, a lack of oversight, a lack of enforcement of even the rules that we have. And I'll be putting some of those pictures up as we go on.
Thank you. That website is MC, then the number 4, T as in Tom.org, mc4t.org. And Theodora, thank you very much for that, because it has been incredible efforts by an amazing team of resident volunteers that have put in countless hours of work on developing this information, of responding to misinformation, disinformation that's been spread, particularly by the lead sponsor, and to try to inform residents of this county about the complexities of wireless zoning and the complete abdication of wireless enforcement for years. And we've been working on this issue since 2017. But I can't thank enough the volunteers that have just worked so hard on this issue, which magnifies our disappointment even more to see how that work is really absolutely of no value to the majority of the current council.
Nicole Williams, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Williams. I am a Montgomery County resident who has been so proud to be a part of this coalition. This is just super important. We're a small but mighty group. And I've just learned so much from them. And honestly, the way that we care about our neighbors is the way that our council should care about us. And so I just want to add that, regarding the racial equity lens, if the council was truly committed to equity, they would look at ZTA 1907 through that lens in regards of the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act that was sponsored by Councilmember Nancy Navarro and co-sponsored by all the council members. That bill in particular is 2719, which goes into effect in December, and they can honestly wait until then, or even now, consider the language in that bill to make sure that 1907 aligns. Also, this bill has no guarantees for affordable monthly service, affordable phones and computers, affordable maintenance to fix them, excuse me, when they break, and the simple education about how to use the computers. So, again, if the council is genuine in their efforts to bridge the digital divide, they have to consider all the factors that cause that divide. And it really is astonishing that they are just ignoring that. So that's what I wanted to add. It's just the importance of truly bridging that gap and making this situation equal for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Peter Kahn, would you like to speak? You have to unmute yourself. There.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm an attorney, and I've been very interested in the rationale that's been offered for this bill, the ZTA. When I first spoke to one of the county attorneys, I was told that there were two fundamental reasons for adopting this measure. One was policy reasons, which you all know about, and the second was legal reasons. And they felt that they were constrained, that they must act in order to avoid legal action by the FCC or by the telecoms, who would sue them for failing to make room for them to place their antennas. Well, I'm not sure about the FCC. I think there's nothing to that. With respect to the telecoms, there is literally nothing to this. This is a fear of the monsters under the bed. there is no legitimacy to what they're saying. So Montgomery County is part of the state of Maryland, which is part of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Fourth Circuit, along with all of the other federal circuits that have ruled on this, have ruled that the placement and construction of cell phone towers is something that's governed by a particular section of the Telecommunications Act. And basically it says that a local community has every right to deny a permit to a telecom unless the telecom can show that there's an effective prohibition of service. And the courts have been very clear. By an effective prohibition, they mean essentially two things. First, that there is an absolute absence of coverage, and they do not mean just an absence of coverage by the latest form of technology or the latest form of wireless technology, but by any form of wireless. And so here in Montgomery County, we have very abundant cell phone coverage. If you look at the maps of any of the telephone companies, the Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, we are literally glowing with coverage. There is no absence of coverage. So there may be individual places that maybe have some shortage, but the second provision of the Fourth Circuit's requirement is that there be absolutely no other place at which the cell antenna can be placed. In other words, you can deny it. The local community can deny the permit unless A, there's an effective absence of coverage, a prohibition of service, and B, there's no other place that can reasonably be used to place that antenna. Well, we have literally tens of thousands of cell phone poles in this county that have not yet been used. The Fed committee itself went around and actually got estimates of the number of cell phone of poles that are still available to be used. So even if there is an absence of coverage, there are many other places to put those cell towers. So there is a complete absence of rationale for what they're doing here. It does not make sense. And for that reason, I'm very disappointed that they have decided to move forward with this when really there is no need and there is no legal rationale. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter. I mean, the process has been what I would call just steamrolled through. It was introduced to the full council June 29th. On June 13th, they allowed just 48 hours for other council members to submit amendments. And there hasn't been time for them to actually get facts straight because misinformation has been put forward. They say their hands are tied and they have to do it.
Yeah.
And if that were the case, all the communities which have larger setbacks would then be facing the fate of being sued constantly, and that hasn't happened, and it's shocking. I also wanted to add there are over 60 pages of dense, detailed technical amendments that were put forward, and plus 9 amendments submitted by resident groups, and there is no way that the council members could adequately address this in just 2 working days. So clearly the amendments and the facts were frankly dismissed without even deliberating. So thank you. And Sue Present wanted to speak, if you want to unmute.
Hi, I'm Sue Present. I am a resident advocate. I have a professional background on these issues, but have been advocating for appropriate location of wireless facilities for well over a decade. This ZTA is a sham on the residents of this county. The lead sponsor and council staff have, as others have mentioned, several times asserted that the FCC and the court order are requiring this the changes that are in the ZTA, but that's false. As we have seen during some of the Fed committee interchanges, it is actually more of a matter that they're carrying the water for the wireless industry. And as Rick Meyer said, this is a matter of trying to serve the industry, as if the wireless industry needs courting to be here. They do not. The ZTA sponsors and council staff have pushed back against anyone who has suggested the need for more resident protective legislation. Resident advocates, the county executive, even their fellow council members. In response to the county executive's amendments that proposed requiring both property owners and tenants be advised, have notice when these matters go before OZA, the county council staff said tenants are not permanent, whereas the pole would be. That's outrageous. Shouldn't people be valued more than poles? Shouldn't tenants be valued more than towers? Where are we living? Several council members who pride themselves on their advocacy for tenants and for racial equity and social justice issues are just looking the other way on the ZTA. I think this is abhorrent. I'll pause for now, but I will say more later.
Thank you, Sue. I am a Montgomery County resident, which is how I am here right now, but I also am a petitioner myself, as well as the organization that I'm executive director of, Environmental Health Trust. We are the petitioners in the case EHT et al. Versus the FCC that has over a dozen petitioners. And we are calling the FCC to task on their decision where they decided that their 1996 human exposure limits for radio frequency radiation are somehow irrelevant and do not need to be changed today. So in our case, and you can go onto our website at ehtrust.org to learn more about that, we are shocked that the council is moving forward because that decision is expected quite eminently, as the oral argument was in January. And Montgomery County itself had a case previous where they were stating that they're concerned about the small cell rollout because they haven't, the FCC has not updated its limits in 25 years. And they independently challenged the FCC on this. They basically said, how can you force us to roll these small cells out when the FCC limits were last reviewed in 1996? So it seems reasonable and responsible to wait until a decision has been issued in this case before moving forward and opening the floodgates on 5G, as the Montgomery County Council is about to do. And I'm going to show a brief clip of the hearing.
Montgomery County's concern is what the FCC has yet to say. In response to rulemaking comments that the FCC's RF exposure standards may not reflect the current safety research or account for this new 5G environment that we're going to see in the coming years, and that the FCC must resolve those issues before accelerating the siting and the operation of these 5G small cells on public rights-of-way, the FCC offered a single sentence. It said it disagreed with any concerns that Montgomery County or others have.
I echo your thoughts. Anita Prince.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Anita Prince. I'm an ESOL teacher in Montgomery County, and I feel very strongly about this issue. It seems to me that the council is pushing this through at a time when most people are unaware. They're sneaking it through, and it's not really given the amount of concern that it would normally get if it were given at another time. I'm really advocating that the council defer any decisions until September. People are away on vacation. They're just recovering from the pandemic. They do not understand what a massive infrastructure change this will make to their communities. And whether or not we believe that these cell towers cause cancer or illnesses, there absolutely is controversy. And this is a new technology. And maybe some residents just don't want to be first adopters of this new technology that industry is forcing on us and telling us that it's so wonderful. Well, maybe I want to say pass until I know more. And the council is not giving us that option. They're taking that away from us. They're saying we're going to blanket our entire community with this new technology, and because, well, our hands are tied, so let's just let them roll over us and let's play dead. So I really believe strongly that this cannot go forward, that the council needs to do their job. They have a gun to their head, they say. Well, don't train the gun to us, okay? Don't push it away from your head and turn it on us, okay? And there would not be a gun unless there was an issue, right? There's an issue, and that is an issue of safety, and that has not been addressed, and industry will not even address it. They just say, we were just following the guidelines. So this is not something that we can force on our children. There are so many uncertainties. We must protect the most vulnerable citizens in Montgomery County, our children. I'm a teacher. I'm concerned about the setbacks for children's, in daycares, in schools, where their vulnerable bodies will be exposed to this a level of radiation where we do not know the long-term effects. No one knows. So we're just going to say, okay, well, let's just let the headless horsemen rush off to their profits, and whatever happens, well, we'll just pick up the pieces. We will pick up the pieces, and it's not right. And this has to stop. We are asking the council to do their job, and that is to make the community the priority, not delivering franchises to businesses with no valid and no demonstrated need. And there has not been demonstrated need, and the community has not demanded this, especially not the Black and Brown community, who will be most impacted by this, because they are waiting at the bus stops. Our children are waiting for their buses on the corners. Our houses are closer to the poles. Black and Brown people are disproportionately affected by environmental degradation and pollution. And this is a form of environmental pollution that is electronic smog that is affecting our health. I am truly asking the council to do what they were elected to do, and that is to represent all the constituents and do what is in their best interest. And I'm asking them to wait till September so that more people can have an input. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. Susan Kahn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Kahn, K-A-H-N. I'm another Montgomery County resident. I'm from Chevy Chase, and it's been such an amazing thing to see the solidarity of people all over our county, from Potomac to Silver Spring, Germantown, Gaithersburg, Kensington, people just coming together and coming together to object to a technology being put among us without any right for us to have a voice about its placement. I don't think that there's a legal mandate to do this. I think it's very clear that telecommunications attorneys from around the country have said, you do not have to put this technology 30 feet from a home. There was nothing that says that. And even our own council has told us before that At first, this ZTA, this zoning amendment, said something about 60 feet to the home. And then in March, they suddenly voted to make it 30 feet. So was there suddenly a new memo, a new gavel from the FCC coming down on them that like burst the idea bubble above their head that before it said 60 and then suddenly it said 30? I mean, was that forced also? No, that was an utterly discretionary choice that the council made in March to change the setback from 60 feet to 30 feet. And they keep saying whatever they do, they keep moving the, I don't know, moving the goal line or something, or moving the mandate. Suddenly they hide behind, oh, the FCC is requiring this. Some law, some case in another circuit that doesn't even pertain to us is requiring it. And that it rings hollow after a while. You really have to question that. More than that, I worked in the area of humanities computing before. I was a professor of English specializing in that area. And one of my specializations was introducing technologies, new technologies, and how people deal with and integrate new technologies in their lives in a human context. I would say that the introduction of this zoning amendment into our county is a poster child for how not to introduce a new technology into a human context. There is no feedback loop. There is no way for people to have a voice about whether they want the technology, about what the effects are. There's no mandate that there be emissions tests for the impact of that technology in terms of radio frequency radiation emissions. They've actually created a zoning amendment that will allow these to be placed 30 feet from our homes without any input by residents in a public hearing, without any notice to residents. So what do you expect residents will do when you put that technology they didn't expect, suddenly a cell tower is in front of their home? They're going to be surprised, they're going to be shocked, they're going to feel hurt by that and marginalized. And I also work in the area of mediation and conflict resolution. And I can tell you, when I heard about this at the beginning, that was the main thing. It set off such major red flags. You are going to have massive conflict and disharmony in terms of neighbor to neighbor conflict, in terms of neighbor to elected leaders conflict, with this type of rollout that tries to bypass human interaction and human influence on what this technology looks like in our lives. So I would just encourage you to do the sorts of things my wonderful colleagues have already talked about here from around the county and around the country. Do your job. Don't take away the option to say no to this. Don't take away our rights to control our own rights of way that municipalities have had for a few hundred years. We obviously have that right, or you wouldn't have to pass this ZTA. So we shouldn't be talking just about the number of polls, but the impact on people. It's people, not polls, that we should be concerned with the interests of people. So thank you for thinking about that. We all have interests. We want to protect our homes, our health, our property values, but mainly we really want to have a voice. And so this is not the way to do it, and we need to be much more careful. Hopefully we will wait until there's a racial equity, social justice impact statement done and a climate impact statement done, because we need to understand how this technology is going to look in our human environment before we adopt it whole scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. We have a lot of people on the phone as well. Cynthia Bauman, would you like to speak?
This is Cindy Bachman. I'm sorry I don't have my camera. I lost it this weekend in an electrical storm, and I'm waiting for my new one. I just wanted to say that, if you take a look at some of the legal actions that Montgomery County has been involved in over the past couple of years with regard to cell tower placement and health issues, you would be shocked to see the ZTA that is drafted, given the knowledge that these council members have on this topic. If you read what they wrote in their cases, you would see that we as residents and as constituents of these council members are completely aligned with what they're saying and what their expert testimony is saying on a number of different issues. somehow there's a disconnect and a lack of accountability with our council members and not kind of explaining where their mindset has changed in the last year or so. I mean, a couple of examples are Montgomery County had in one of its federal court filings, expert testimony about property values declining when you live near a cell tower. And some of those studies were done talking about larger cell towers, not even the ones that will be 30 feet. So they acknowledge that your home can decrease, and we don't even have, you know, information right now to see what happens if you have a small cell right outside your front door. So they know this. They don't put it in their briefing papers. They use other studies in the briefing papers that show something different than what we know they're smart enough to know. They know that health is a major concern. Montgomery County in its court filings even said that if the new 5G environment has health risks, any rollout of it without studying it is going to potentially injure citizens of Montgomery County, and they called that result unconscionable. I asked them in 2019 when I testified, if that's unconscionable, what has happened to their thinking process, because they're rolling out something that they themselves don't seem to believe in. They also talked about the batch application process, which we've used here in Montgomery County and which has resulted in cell towers being placed in incorrect locations, wrong setbacks, wrong heights. They've said themselves in court filings that using batch applications isn't a good idea because you can't study how the impact is on one individual, one school. I've read batch applications and they've described properties as small cell on wood pole. So that gives you no information where the tower is going. This particular one, we were trying to help out a Montessori school on Trevillo Road in Rockville. They got a cell tower one weekend and there was no picture of that school that showed where it was. The camera angle showed bushes in the front. It didn't show that there was a school there. So the tower committee approved it and it went up. And now nobody can get it removed. So and ironically, the Montessori school, my son used to go there when he was small, it's called a no cell zone. They don't want phones. They don't want distractions for the kids. That's not their style. And here they have a big cell tower right out front. So that just shows there's almost no thought process behind this. It's just really concerning. We've raised all of the issues that they've raised in their court filings, and we've asked for answers as to why they've changed their minds, and we're not getting one. What we are getting from the sponsor of this bill is misinformation and inaccuracies and name calling, which really upsets me every time the co-sponsor of this bill comes out and says something and someone challenges it. He calls them anti-vaxxers, kooks, and junk science and all of this stuff. And it's a complete lack of respect. And I would hope the other council members would actually call him out on this, because I got my COVID vaccine. I was pleased to get it for myself and my family. I don't want to be, you know, threatened and bullied by the sponsor of this bill. And he's just distracting us because he doesn't really have an answer for what they're doing. He's trying to say 1G, 2G, whatever, FM, they're all the same, but they're not. And then he has some talking points that if Dr. Fauci thought it was unsafe, he would tell us, but Dr. Fauci is an infectious disease doctor. He's not, doesn't have this area of expertise. So I'm not quite sure why this kind of not very well reasoned and thought out analysis by the sponsor of the bill is being accepted by these council members. I think it's embarrassing. Montgomery County is full of professionals, attorneys, all kinds of people who actually know better than this, as do the council members. So I really wish they would, you know, at least hold some kind of public hearing and answer some of the questions we've raised, and consider having like a peer-reviewed third party present to do some fact checking, because they're not capable of fact checking themselves. So maybe somebody else that's outside of this can actually listen to and kind of raise their hand like they do on Twitter now and flag the stuff that's not a truth so they can actually get the correct message out to residents, because we'd really appreciate that. So hopefully that's a takeaway for them. I'd love to see that happen. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I know there are several people on the phone. I wanted to put out a reporter's question that we could respond to as well. The county is being mandated to do this, she says, which is something that can be responded to, as well as Councilman Reamer says that the county zoning amendments are much stricter than local governments in the region to, quote, meet community criticism, unquote. Would you prefer a community work group like the county executive has suggested to implement 5G? So if you folks would like to respond to that, I mean, the answer is that we have been calling for, and the petition has been for, a community work group since that was first put forward. Not by everyone who's on this call, but certainly when that came forth. And then, of course, it seemed like they were just ramming this through. So then there were amendments. But would someone like to speak to this issue of being mandated and other local governments in the region? And I would point out that Washington, D.C. has actually far more, clear, meaningful protections for trees. I think it still has a way to go, but at least they state that they cannot be removed nor aggressively pruned for the small cell infrastructure. And they actually have a setback as well. So that's just one piece. And I'm going to get up some more resources, but I don't know if someone would like to respond to what other jurisdictions are doing and to this question that she's raised, please. Yep, Kate, you want to unmute? Peter.
I'm trying to unmute.
There you go. Perfect.
So one thing that I'm aware of is that, obviously every jurisdiction, every community in America has to respond in some way or other to this mandate from the FCC. And many, many jurisdictions, vast numbers of jurisdictions across America have setbacks that are much, much larger than those imposed in this bill. So there are communities that require a setback of 500 feet, and those have not yet been challenged and probably won't be challenged by the FCC or by the telecoms because there's no effective prohibition of service. It seems to me that the legal issue here is so transparently unsupported that you have to wonder, what is the real motivation behind what they're doing, and is it really because they believe this, or is this a false flag, so to speak? Are they giving us this reason because they're really doing it for other reasons, and they don't want us to know about it? So I think one of the virtues of County Executive Elrich's proposal is that it will give everyone a chance to be heard, for us all to respond as we see fit to each other, and motivations and real intentions will come out. That's my view.
Thank you very much. And Colleen would like to speak. She's on the phone.
I'm actually up here.
Oh.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm a former reporter, so I happen to have written down what Hans said today, Hans Reamer, he said at the end that other nearby jurisdictions, that we are somewhat more restrictive than our counterparts. So he's not claiming that we're very much more restrictive. And I think if you listened both carefully today and at earlier sessions, it's clear that Councilmember Reamer actually doesn't know many details of other jurisdictions' bills. His knowledge seems to be very shallow. And basically, it sounds like he was looking for jurisdictions that had very, very, very generous setbacks, glommed onto them, and has been using those as the examples of the race to the bottom that we must win. I have some other things I'd like to talk about if you feel that's answered the question.
Yeah, would you like to speak about them?
Yeah, so on the question of the timing, I think it's clear that the majority of the council is ready to vote for this ZTA. However, their choice is to vote at the last session before their recess, when everybody's gone on their summer vacation and isn't paying attention, or the first session when they come back in September. And I think it would be very prudent for them to vote on it in September. That will give them time for several things. Two very important cases. The decisions are expected in August. One of them is the Environmental Health Trust case. Either one of them could put Montgomery County into a totally different place in terms of what's possible in a ZTA, in terms of what we are forced to do by the FCC. Every reason in the world, if the county council has the interests of residents topmost in mind, to say, okay, we're ready with that ZTA, but we will not vote on it until September, and we will wait to find out what those court decisions are. Another reason is we do indeed need a racial equity and social justice impact analysis that will give them time for that at whatever level. There will be time for it. Many climate action groups in the county have requested a climate impact statement that would provide some time for that. And fourthly, the ZTA, if it's approved next week, will take effect in 20 days. That means sometime during August, when probably all the folks at the Department of Permitting Services are trying to take a vacation, and the Tower Committee, and they'll be expected to suddenly be processing on a shot clock hordes of new applications coming in from the telecom industry. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense? Give them the month of August. They see what's coming down the pipeline. Give them the month of August and half of September to actually figure out what are the new regulations that are needed to make this an orderly process, if indeed they wanted to go forward with it. And secondly, what about the fees? They really need to restructure the fees. Councilmember Reamer, back in March, after the committee passed its version of the ZTA, said, well, we can't really pass this until we figure out the fees. That hasn't happened. I don't know if that could happen over the recess or not, but they sure better get started on it. Again, if they would put off the vote, not put it off, but schedule it, because I don't believe it's been formally scheduled, schedule it for September. That allows time for all of these very important, prudent things to happen. And I would personally, I'm calling on Council President Tom Hucker, who schedules these sessions. Councilmember Hucker, we ask you, I believe others would join me, do not schedule the vote for July 27th. That's not fair, that's not prudent, that's not wise for the county for all those reasons. Schedule it for September if you must have a vote on ZTA 1907. And to Councilmember Hans Reamer, who is my neighbor down the street in Tacoma Park, I challenge you, Hans, if you believe that this ZTA is totally safe, you have nothing to fear from waiting for the FCC decision and for the other decisions. If you're not afraid of, if the point of rushing to a vote is not to make sure industry gets under the wire, under permissive rules that would not be permitted if you waited until September and these court cases are decided, then show us that you're not afraid and just wait until mid-September. Do this in the public interest. The other couple things I want to talk about is there's a huge issue going on right now about the broken review and inspection process for rooftop antennas on multifamily dwellings. And I hope that there is someone from the press today who's actually interested in knowing more about this, because we've not been able to find a member of the council who really wants the details. A group of us have done some research. We found 20 multifamily apartment buildings where the applicants for rooftop cell towers turned in official reports that showed their own consultants predicted the rooftop levels. There would be areas on the rooftops where the radio frequency radiation would exceed federal limits. And it would exceed it from a little over 100% to as much as 114 times the FCC limits. The Tower Committee green-lighted those applications. There is no process in the county to go back and actually take on-site measurements to make sure residents and workers are not being illegally exposed to levels of RF radiation that exceed federal limits. No one debates that that's not safe, but the county has no processes. They have no process for rooftop antennas, for macro towers, and they have no processes planned for doing any on-site measurements for small cell towers on poles. up and down neighborhood streets. So that's an urgent problem. That should be the first priority, not ZTA 1907. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen. I would like to add a few things about some of this issue that Councilman Reamer is saying that, you know, if there were a problem, NIH would say so, or the CDC, the EPA, NCI, those agencies that we generally would think would be putting forward the public health information we need to know related to this, that they've all deemed this safe. And that is simply false for several reasons. First, the EPA was defunded from dealing with the issue of electromagnetic fields in 1996, just as they were poised to actually federally develop safety limits as to that question we all have, which is, what is safe? At what level could people be harmed? They weren't even considering, by the way, trees, birds, bees, our pollinators. And they were defunded in 1996. And the letter that they sent me last year confirms, there's a letter between the Director of Radiation and Air, Director Veal, where it is stated they have no funded mandate to look into this issue. And I would add that we have recently testified to the Environmental Protection Agency, to their Children's Environmental Health Group, as well as their research. They had an open listening session where you could testify about issues the EPA now needs to address. And we have been raising that issue, Environmental Health Trust. In addition, the Food and Drug Administration, actually, despite their fancy webpage, which was put up just 2 years ago, kind of directly seemed to be in regards to the Montgomery County case, which was put forward, they have not reviewed the research on impacts to brain development. They have not even reviewed the research on cell tower radiation. And although they have a review which states that there is no need to change levels, if you look under the covers on that, and we have letters going back and forth between the FDA that the New Hampshire Commission on 5G has put forward for everyone to read, clearly showing that they haven't looked at the full body of research on humans, much less on animals, bees, trees, and birds. The CDC, their webpage, and Councilman Reamer brought up the CDC, their web pages, actually several of them on non-ionizing radiation, which are up, were actually drafted under the tutelage of a industry-funded scientist who was brought in under contract to help write web pages after Dr. Chris Portier left. So the National Cancer Institute, in fact, who recently wrote me, and with everything going on, I didn't have a chance to forward that to the council because I'd already sent them this information, which is that they aren't involved in the regulations. They haven't looked at the limits and said, are these limits safe? There is no group of scientists at the National Cancer Institute looking at all the research and determining, is this safe? What is our opinion? In fact, in our case, Environmental Health Trust et al. Versus the FCC, they put in a submission. It was a one-page, less than one-page submission where they simply said, we're glad that you are doing this, to the FCC. They didn't offer an opinion as to whether limits were protective or not. So it's all there, and that's actually part of our case against the FCC. Our federal agencies in the United States are not and have not fully reviewed the mounting body of research. And that is why it is shocking that they are moving forward so rapidly. So again, you can put questions in the chat or send them to me. We have a few more people on the phone. Marty Langeland, if you'd like to speak. Maybe
there. I'm unmuted. Thank you. It took a moment. Yeah, I really appreciate this panel. I think that the points made here, just one after another, have been devastating to any notion that this council is acting responsibly by going forward at this point. Obviously, we need a stakeholders group. As the county executive proposed, we need a lot more focus on the actual accurate information. And, you know, the information from the telecom industry and their pet scientists reminds me of Monsanto for years, doing quote science, unquote, that showed that Roundup was safe. Well, we found out that, Monsanto got sued and is paying millions of dollars in damages. And I think that, there needs to be a healthy skepticism toward industry-produced assurances that new technologies are safe, particularly because we do know from a lot of the data, as Theodora has just pointed out, that the radio frequency radiation does affect kids particularly, that the dosage levels that are safe have not really been established. There's a lot been happening since 1996, and I think it was probably just a guess back then. And there's a lot more information out now. So I am concerned about the health effects. And there's no exception in this zoning amendment that would allow for people with leukemia or cancers who have been warned by their medical teams not to expose themselves to radiation. There's no measurement even, as somebody pointed out, no way to even measure the amount of radiation they're being exposed to. If they're in an apartment and they've got a cell tower on the roof of the apartment, who knows what the radiation level in their apartment is? So there's an ADA issue here in terms of Disabilities Act of are council members looking at the health effects? And the answer is no, they simply don't have the information yet. And acting prematurely without that information is foolish at best. But I also want to raise something that no one else has mentioned so far, which is the energy usage here. The fiber optics and cable technology, number one, it seems to be safer with less radiation. No matter what you think about the radiation risk, there's less radiation, there's safer technology. It is entirely possible to do 5G coverage without more wireless towers. I think Peter Kahn pointed out that Montgomery County already has 98% coverage with the wireless. It's not like we have any prohibitive, prohibition on coverage. We don't. They can't make that legal argument. And it's really the 5G technology, the wireless technology, is an energy hog. It is so inconsistent with Montgomery County's commitment to go to environmentally sound, energy efficient technologies. This is the opposite. This is going down the wrong road. And it is just stunning to me that they have not held this ZTA up to account in terms of their own energy usage standards, because it sure fails that test. So just to summarize a little bit, the legal rationale that somehow the county is required to do this by the FCC or court cases doesn't stand up when you look at it. The rationale that they said that doing this to do community equity, racial equity, social justice doesn't stand up, because the racial equity issue is about affordability. Everybody's got wireless coverage, they just can't afford to have home computers, and they can't afford maintenance, they can't afford computer support. So this does nothing to address equity issues. That rationale falls. Even the technical side of it just doesn't make any sense to me, because everything I've read, and I've been reading up on this quite thoroughly in my usual thorough fashion, I understand that, all you need is one tower every 1,500 feet, every 2,000 feet, every 3,000 feet, depending on, on context. But you certainly don't need a tower every 30 feet. You don't need it 30 feet from somebody's house to give coverage. And the idea that you would invade our neighborhoods with cell towers with no legal justification, because that doesn't stand up, no social equity, social justice rationale, because that doesn't stand up, no technical requirement, because that doesn't stand up, and that it violates the energy standards that the county itself has endorsed, blatantly violates them. What are we doing here? This is so bizarre. And I go to Peter Kahn's point about what's really going on here, because this looks like a giveaway to the telecom industry. And it doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't pass legal muster. It doesn't pass technical muster. It doesn't pass environmental energy muster. It doesn't meet equity needs in terms of social justice. This ZTA is a gift package wrapped with a big red ribbon to give free rein to the telecom industry to literally put a pole any place they want, whenever they want, with no notice and no method of objection. This is bad government, and I really expect better from our council.
That was very well said. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to add that, back in 1996, when these limits were set for radio frequency radiation, the radiation emitted from cell towers, cell phones, all your wireless devices, that the U.S. the FDA asked the National Toxicology Program to do long-term animal studies to understand what the impacts to humans might be, to get more information, because of course we test drugs on animals before drugs are put on the market. And so the National Toxicology Program embarked on a $30 million project to test the following hypothesis. Would low levels that are below appreciable heating, meaning not microwaving you like your microwave oven microwaves you, heats things up, because wireless radiation is microwaves. And they tested these animals for 2 years and found that there were effects, clear evidence of cancer in the male rats, DNA damage in several in different tissues in both mice and rat groups. And they also found heart damage. Now, that study should have been, there should have, if wireless were so safe and cell towers were so safe, we shouldn't have had anything come out of that very well designed study. And there were effects. And so the Ramazzini Institute then did studies looking at animals, but using much lower levels of radio frequency microwave radiation. And they found the same tumor types as found in the National Toxicology Program study. And these tumor types in the animals are comparable and similar tissue types to those found in people who use cell phones for long term. So when you have animals and humans having the same tissue types of tumors, this is a red flag. It's a big red flag. And the US government should have immediately been addressing this issue to quantify it and issued clear recommendations to the public. But that has not happened. So I know that.
Could I say one thing related to that? I think it will help reporters, because so often they get the same resources from the National Cancer Institute, FDA, World Health Organization, which generally say it has not been established. So what I'm suggesting is that you please go to that US National Toxicology Program, find their fact sheet that's written for ordinary people to be able to read. And they state on there, they did the most comprehensive studies on the effects of non-ionizing radiation on animals that have ever been done. 10 years, $30 million, 10 years. And they state that the results of their US government studies challenge the assumption that non-ionizing radiation below the levels that burn your tissues are safe. That is the assumption that FCC's current outdated limits are based on. So the US National Toxicology Program, which is the interagency federal program responsible for doing this research, declares in its fact sheet for you and me that their studies question the assumption, the old assumption that FCC's limits are based on, that non-ionizing radiation below levels that burn tissue are safe. Why has Hans Riemer never investigated and reported that to we residents? That is the US government's most authoritative statement on the effects of non-ionizing radiation on biological effects. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add quickly, and then Peter, if you would like to go, I know you have your hand raised, that a new study just came out a few days ago. They looked at the heart damage. There was heart damage found in the rats, and they quantified it and found that the FCC limits were out by 20 to 40 for adults. And then if you look at children, another 10-fold. And that's just on the issue of heart damage from the exposure, which was considered the non-heating levels. All of our limits are based on the assumption that heating is the only harm. And the other thing that I forgot to mention is the World Health Organization EMF project, which has a fancy fact sheet and other fact sheets online. They have not done a full review of this issue since 1993, according to their own fact sheet. Now, the International Agency for the Research on Cancer of the WHO is a different entity that determined it was a possible carcinogen in 2011. These are two separate entities. The WHO, World Health Organization fact sheet you see online is not based on any report. And I challenge Councilman Riemer, I challenge anyone who thinks that the WHO has done some sort of full review of the issue to show me that report, which has been done looking at all the science. And Peter, go ahead. Sorry. Peter, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. This conversation is really interesting, and it makes me think of one of the issues that the council has raised repeatedly, that they are very afraid of being sued, if they don't enact this and then, telecom starts suing them, and what could possibly be the consequences of that. Well, I'd like to raise the opposite question, which is, suppose that we enact this now, and then, let's say, a few months from now, suddenly the FCC undertakes a serious review of the health issues, and it's in the newspaper that for the first time, the FCC is actually studying the science here. And suppose that a few months from now, when people start objecting to having the cell phones in front of their homes, there starts to be more of a movement against this. And maybe a few months from now, when people start having the health effects that you're describing, how can the county respond to this? Suppose, they were to decide at that point to withdraw their permission to do this. Well, at that point, we have to presume that there will have been quite a few cell antennas already erected and put in place and operating. And then we come along and say, oops, we did give you a permit, but now we're taking it away. What's going to be the result of that? And I cannot imagine that wouldn't result in a lot of litigation and a lot of damages, to have a benefit that the government suddenly, it arbitrarily gave it to you and it arbitrarily takes it away. There could very well be substantial monetary damages that result from that. And the best way, it seems to me, to prevent that situation is to simply wait and let the science really play out and to get a fuller airing of public views on this. But, it seems to me that down the road, there's going to be substantial public opposition to what's been foisted upon us. And, I think that's going to have significant financial consequences for the county. That's it.
Thank you, Peter. Sue Present, would you like to speak? And then Karen Lovejoy, if you've been on the call, you can go after. I apologize.
So I'd like to follow up on a few things that people have said. First of all, I agree with those who have already talked about how irresponsible it is for the council to go forward, especially knowing that this is going to open up the floodgates for applications in the residential areas, and knowing that the council has fees that are so out of date. The fees for the Tower Committee applications alone have never been raised since 2003. And this is something that a number of resident advocates, including myself, have numerous times brought to the attention of the county council. It is just totally irresponsible, because it means that residents, through their taxes, are subsidizing these applications, and these subsidies are going to skyrocket the moment that the floodgates are open. And for several of the council members, they pride themselves on how they are protecting our taxes. Well, they're not protecting our taxes when they're letting this happen. And another matter that I wanted to follow up on concerns the property values. Cindy talked about that, and I appreciate that. But in fact, Montgomery County has collaborated with a number of local governments from across the United States, and both before ZTA 1907 and after ZTA 1907 was introduced, these local governments have come together and brought forward expert documentation to show that small cell poles in the rights of way deflate residential property values. Not just large cell towers, small cell pole towers. Another thing is that the same documentation to the FCC evidenced that the applications in the rights of way would cost more to process than in other locations. So again, it's costing us, the taxpayers, more. We were talking a moment ago about the evidence that Councilmember Reamer says does not exist on health effects and how it's a done deal in his mind. Well, he is part of the council that has asked for funding from Congress to explore research on the health effects of wireless facilities, including 5G. So it is quizzical to me on why the county council and the county executive have asked Senator Van Hollen for funding on what Councilmember Reamer thinks is a done deal. Now, the FCC and the courts have said that we cannot challenge the health effects of RF, but there are other health effects of these antennas. And that is particularly so in vulnerable areas. And these are racial equity and social justice issues. When there is loss of tree canopy, there are health effects. When the lights from the light poles are repositioned in close proximity to homes, that creates light spill at times, and that can disrupt people's sleep. And that has all sorts of health effects. And these are health effects that need to be evaluated and taken into consideration. And this hasn't been done because this has been rushed. And as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of our discussion, tenants are being locked out of the process because they're not receiving notice. And in fact, all residents are being locked out of the process because they're not being given any notice of what the process requires for the conditional use process for the applicant to give for alternative locations. There's no way that any resident receives any notification of where the alternative locations are that the applicant is recommending. And then even if they do receive notice of that, they have no standing to object to the alternative location. So it can be a shell game the way this whole process is located. Here's the one that I recommend, and here's the alternate one over here that you don't get to know about. And you can object to the one that I recommend, but you can't do anything at all about this other one over here. So this whole thing is one big sham.
Thank you, Sue. Karen Lovejoy, you're on the phone, and thank you for holding. I deeply apologize.
Yeah, no problem. There really is not much to say. Everyone has been articulate. Everyone has laid out the facts. And I was just sitting here really thinking, you know, the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing and expect different results. And it's clear to me that I don't know about anybody else, that we need to maybe think about approaching this from a whole nother angle, because something is wrong. As we said, it stinks. Our council members and representatives are not legislating for the good of the people. Clearly, in this case and in others, they are supporting industry. So one of two things to me is going on. There is some kind of mental issue. You know, we can look at the facts. They're readily available. We have presented it to them. Maybe we need to consider enacting legislation that when council members are acting kind of off balance and weird, that we perhaps need to have them examined for their mental acuity or our emotional state, because it's either that or they are not telling the truth. It's one or the other. And it just, we really have to take hold of this issue. Just take the thing of climate change. We understand that we are at critical mass. Every single representative, I think, is claiming that they are pro climate, trying to address the climate issue. But yet we're going to support putting up 5G towers that every piece of science is saying is an energy hog that will take us over the cliff. I mean, we're already at the cliff. So where's the common sense? Something is amiss here. Either it's a mental issue or clearly our representatives are legislating, they're in office to support industry and people and climate and the environment be damned. And I just think it's time for us to perhaps really consider enacting some legislation that addresses when legislators start acting weird, maybe we need to take them down to a lab and have them examined or something, and perhaps grounds for putting them out of office, because it's just not making any sense, and that's really all that I have to say.
Thank you, Karen. I mean, it is, I will say, I find it shocking, the misinformation that's being put out, and it really would have been, I think that the group and the individuals who have been working on this have been incredible at getting that information to our council. And we really need a place where we can air all of that and have it out, because facts are facts, and they're not being listened to in this case, and misinformation is being put forward. But I think that if you follow the money, the answer is right in front of us as to what's going on. And I shared in my blog that I think it was a PR firm's blog post about bringing 5G to Montgomery County, and how there had been a wireless company that had come to this firm asking for help, and how that company had then helped to create legislation. That's what we're talking about here, is telecom financed legislation that our council members are signing off on. So does anyone else have anything to add before we close? I'm having a challenge keeping up with everything in the chat. So go ahead, Nicole.
Just real quick, just Karen's comments are amusing, but at the same time, I think we need to just remember, the direction the council has taken us in. And when it comes time, you show your sentiments at the ballot box. That's what we need to be remembering. We elected these officials and they have decided not to represent our voices. That's a problem. And so just, while we still fight this battle, just remember, set your, party lines aside and really focus on what they're doing and what they're bringing forth, and just how they're just discounting what we have to say, so we can raise our voices at the ballot box. I just want to remind everybody of that when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might add one kind of closing remark, I've been so pleased and grateful for the expertise that's represented on this community panel. And I want to thank everybody, from the legal issues to the health issues to the property value issues. I mean, but I want to come back to the notion of racial equity, because the communities that are going to be most harmed by the ZTA are the disadvantaged communities, immigrant communities, people of color, people who live in apartment buildings that have a radio antenna right on their roof are being exposed to unmeasured radiation. Nothing in the ZTA measures or monitors the amount of radiation that apartment dwellers are being exposed to. Putting these on schools has already happened. And we know from the medical research that has been done that children are especially vulnerable to RF radiation. And the level of irresponsibility here really just takes my breath away. It is just unconscionable. And it galls me no end, as someone who cares a lot about racial and social justice, that that's one of the rationales that somehow this zoning amendment is going to help racial equity. Just the opposite. The people who are going to be most exposed to unmonitored, unmeasured radiation, to the health effects, to the loss of property values, are the disadvantaged communities. As I think Nicole said earlier, the houses are closer to the right of way. You're going to be closer to the pole. Your property value is going to go down because the pole's right in front of your building. And the fact that the county has the gall, the nerve to say, oh, this is a racial justice issue, just floors me, because it's the opposite. For one thing, it will probably make cell phone service more expensive. And the whole issue in terms of racial justice here is not whether the technology is accessible, but whether it's affordable, which it is not for many, many people. And nothing here makes it more affordable. It makes it less affordable. So that rationale fails completely. And I'm just so disappointed in the council that they have failed to listen to really incredibly powerful information on all of these factors, and that they won't examine even the legal basis for their actions, which just floors me. But really, we deserve better. We expect better. We deserve better. It's not too late for the council to do the right thing here. Defer, reschedule the vote until September, get the court decisions in here, take a look at the actual research on the science, take a look at the actual effects on disadvantaged communities here. If you're going to pass some kind of ZTA, make sure it includes affordability, which this doesn't even touch. So there is so many good things we could be doing here to make this safer, smarter, better. And I'm appalled that the council isn't doing any of them. Shame on the Montgomery County Council. And we expect better, we deserve better. And yeah, I vote. I promise I vote. I know we all do. But this can't wait for a vote. We don't want them to put this in the meantime. So let's continue to really ask our council members to step up to the plate here and do the right thing, because it's really clear that this proposal is not just problematic, it's a disaster. And we can stop it now. It's not too late. I expect the council to take action responsibly. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your expertise. Thank you for fighting the good fight here, because like people have said, if we don't do it, who will? If not now, when? Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be among you, and I just appreciate your expertise so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marty. Catherine? You can unmute yourself. Catherine Katzen.
Thank you so much. I echo the gratitude to the expertise here. And I just want to also echo what some people have said about the digital divide. As another ESOL teacher in the county who works with students who receive farm services and students in Title I schools, I really appreciate the focus on closing the digital divide. But I just want to reiterate that there's nothing in the ZTA that actually does that. There's no incentive, no requirements to provide for the families that need this. And in fact, there is, in contrast, actually the FiberNet internet service in the county that that could be used to reduce this problem. And also, I understand that the president has a sweeping executive order with a number of initiatives to improve broadband service. And I want to express also my gratitude to Delegate Al Carr, who's shared that he's focused on encouraging the FCC to ban the practice of landlords cutting deals to limit tenants' access to wired broadband. I think the FiberNet and Delegate Carr's initiative are things that we can focus on to close the digital divide. And I'm thankful for that beacon of hope of some people standing up for us. And I'm also thankful to Council President Hucker, and greatly thankful to Council Member Katz for representing our issues and standing up for what's right. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much, Catherine.